What is up, everybody? Welcome to this U.S. men's national team reflection video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of my videos throughout the remainder of the World Cup. And of course, when we get back into the club season once the World Cup comes to an end. Now that I've had a couple days to reflect and we have a little bit of a break here in the World Cup action with the quarterfinals getting ready to take place later this week, I wanted to take some time to really dive into the U.S. men's national team, what this tournament meant, and where this team is moving forward. And I want to sort of focus on three particular categories. First, just the tournament overall. I mentioned this in my immediate recap video of the Netherlands game, and I feel even stronger about it now. This tournament was absolutely a success. Had to get out of the group, did it, and did it while looking really good. With a brand new team, with one guy who had played in a World Cup before. And the other part of this is think back to where this team was at the beginning of this World Cup cycle and where this team is now, where you have a midfield that can boss games, where you can outplay England. They went through the group stage and were the better team on the field in all three games. Now, wasn't the case in the round of 16, but all of that needs to be acknowledged. And so I look at this in the context of realistic expectations, which to me were somewhere between the quarterfinals and round of 16. To me, this is team 10 to 15 if you're ranking the best teams in the world. So it's right in there. If you get a little bit of a break, if you draw the right team, if you play, a really good game on the right day, you can get to a quarterfinal. If you make some individual mistakes, you're going to lose that quarterfinal game. But one of the big things I emphasized coming out of this game that I want to hit on again here is the U.S. did not get eliminated by the Netherlands because they were played off the field. They lost that game in large part due to individual mistakes that are absolutely fixable. If that is the story coming out of this tournament, I will take it every single time. And so now, the second thing I want to get into here is the actual player pool and kind of the situation heading into 2026. There's a terrific foundation in place, out wide and in the midfield. Obviously, that midfield three is going to be around for a long, long time. They're already all playing at high level in Europe. They were sensational in this tournament. It's one of the better midfields in the world in terms of national teams. They're all young. They're only going to get better. And they already have the ability to control games. That is, if you want one thing out of your team to sort of build around, to me, it is that. And then you also look out wide from the fullback positions where Jedi Robinson, Serginho Dest already playing for really good teams in Europe. I'm already seeing reports that even bigger clubs are interested in both of them. That's your right back and left back moving forward as well. You got all that figured out already. And then you get to the spots where there are holes that need to be addressed. Starting, of course, with the striker position. I am not going to sit here and say Ricardo Pepi should have made this team. If Ricardo Pepi was on the team, things would have ended differently, because I just don't believe that's the case. I understand he's in really good form right now. He was in really good form heading into the squad selection. He also spent, a year or so in the wilderness before that. He got his opportunities, and nobody was really banging the drum that Ricardo Pepi needs to be the number 9, lockdown starter game in, game out. When he did get those opportunities, Berhalter called him back into that final camp, which I think was the right decision, and he didn't do much there either. He had an opportunity, and he didn't do enough with it. It's easy when the other guys don't deliver to say, well, that guy would have been better. I'm just not convinced that was the case. Certainly possible, and Pepi has every opportunity to be a big part of this team moving forward. If he can find a home in Europe, kind of get himself settled finally, continue to score goals like he is right now. Certainly nobody at this tournament did anything to improve their stock in terms of the number 9 moving forward. And so Pepi's going to get other opportunities to do so. The other guy I want to see get opportunities is Brandon Vasquez. I understand profile-wise he's not exactly what Berhalter's looking for. Berhalter's going to be the last point here. So maybe that opportunity comes with a managerial change and a change in system. also just fundamentally, if Greg Berhalter keeps saying we need, the guys that are going to go to this World Cup, because I think he said this at least once, are the guys that are putting the ball in the back of the net. And then to not give Brandon Vasquez any kind of opportunity to even see what he looks like. I'm not saying he should have made this roster. I don't know he would have been a better option. But at some point in the next 4 years, I would love to see him get a run of games where he can familiarize himself with these players, with whatever the system's going to end up being, and really get a chance to prove himself. Because just about everybody else in the striker pool has gotten that chance. And he hasn't yet. And he just, his combination of physical skills, his pace, and his finishing. You saw what he did to Aaron Long in the MLS playoffs. He certainly appears on his way out at some point to a move to Europe if he keeps doing what he's doing for FC Cincinnati. There's just too much to like about him. He's been too impressive to just completely disregard him. So that is one of the things I would like to see at some point, whether it's a Gold Cup, a Copa America, whatever it might be, to give him an opportunity, to at least bring him into this conversation at this position that is so unsettled and so murky in terms of who the best option is. The second spot I want to touch on is center back, because you're going to see some dramatic changes over the next 4 years. Obviously, Tim Ream is not a part of the long-term future for this team. Walker Zimmerman certainly still has good years ahead of him. It's not like he's going anywhere in the near future. But by 2026, you're probably having a different conversation in that regard too. So I just want to run through some of the guys, some that made this team, some that didn't, in terms of kind of what I see for the future of this position. Of course, Miles Robinson's going to have an opportunity once he's healthy to get right back into a starting spot for this team. He earned a lockdown starter spot by the way he performed during qualifying. He probably would have had one even with Tim Ream's ascendance or Berhalter's change of opinion on him, however you want to frame it. Had he not been injured, he certainly would have made this team at the very least. He is going to get every opportunity to win that spot back. Chris Richards, another guy, probably would have made this team if he didn't get injured. At some point, you've got to find a home where you're consistently playing. Maybe that's Crystal Palace, and of course, he's still very early in his career there. That is my one mental hurdle with Chris Richards at this point, is I want to just see him playing consistently. That was certainly looked like what the Crystal Palace move was intended to do. Let's see how this plays out, where he sort of ends up, because at some point you've got to get consistent playing time. Doesn't need to happen immediately, but to get into the conversation and to get yourself on rosters, of course, that's a big part of the story here. So that's my one hesitation with Chris Richards. Cameron Carter-Vickers looked good when he played in this tournament. He's captaining Celtic sometimes, playing in the Champions League. He's very much inserted himself into the consistent call-ups for this team moving forward, in my estimation. Eric Palmer-Brown, still very much a factor in this conversation as well. Then you have Mark McKenzie, who was so good for the Philadelphia Union, has so many physical gifts, his passing ability, and it just hasn't really happened for him playing for the U.S. yet. I would like to see him get some more opportunities on lower stakes situations to see if he can kind of build himself to the point where you feel better about him in a World Cup. Because I do have my hesitations. He just doesn't look comfortable playing for the U.S. yet. But I do also hold out hope that that changes over time, because he has a lot to offer in terms of his raw ability. The other two guys I want to bring into this conversation, who were really not anywhere near factors for the squad for the 2022 World Cup. First is Austin Trusty. Austin Trusty was kind of the forgotten about guy. He went to Colorado, then he goes to Arsenal, and is now on loan in the Championship, is playing really well. Again, it's kind of like Chris Richards. If he can find, and also Ricardo Pepi, if he can find a home within the European structure where he's getting consistent playing time, and it certainly doesn't look like that's going to be Arsenal. Through no fault of Trustees, they just have two really good young center backs, and also are, winning the Premier League as I record this video. So maybe it's probably going to take another move. But if he can find a home and continue doing what he's doing, Don't forget how good he was for the Philadelphia Union, sort of before the Philadelphia Union became what they are now. He is also a very technically gifted center back who I have high hopes for. So I want to throw him into this conversation because I think there's a world, if he continues on the path he's on and figures out his club situation permanently, he might enter into this equation as well. And then the other guy who you're starting to hear a lot about is Louisville City's Josh Winder. He is the best young center back prospect in this pool, without a doubt. He is one of the best prospects, sort of, that's going to be part of the next wave of players entering this U.S. men's national team equation, period. He is sensational. He is already drawing plenty of interest from Europe. He's going to be on his way there sooner rather than later. It's probably going to be a seven-figure price. And again, this guy is playing in the USL Championship. He's playing for a very good USL Championship team. That is how much potential, that is what he is already proving so early in his career. He is an incredibly exciting prospect. Again, when you're talking about a Gold Cup, a Copa America, to give guys some opportunities and set the stage for 2026, he is another one who there's probably going to be some bumps along the road just because he's so young, but I want to see him get involved at some point in the next few years, or even if it's just friendlies. Get him acclimated because he is on track to be a huge part of this team by the time we're talking about a 2026 World Cup. The other thing I want to mention here, it's not a specific position, but it is the one thing that this team is really lacking, in my opinion, outside of the obvious number 9 conversation, is a truly creative midfielder not named Gio Reyna. Because to me, Christian Pulisic, yes, he has some of that, but to me, his best role is more on the, making the runs in behind, the finishing, the getting into the box like he did for the goal, that kind of stuff. He's not somebody who breaks a defense down. He's got some one-on-one ability, of course. But I think there are things he does better. And so one of the issues you have with this team is who is making that incisive pass. You saw that over and over again in this tournament. Who is the guy that's actually unlocking a defense? Because that's not really what Christian Pulisic does. And the couple times it happened, it was mainly off of Weston McKennie's passes. I would love to see somebody get involved in this team, even if it's just coming off the bench sometimes, who does that regularly. And there are 2 names I want to bring up. I've continued to go to bat for Jordi Mihailovic, and I'm bringing him up again here. For whatever reason, Berhalter just doesn't seem to be a fan. But if this guy starts producing in Europe, now that he's on his way to the Netherlands, at some point you're going to have to give him another shot at this. I just love what he offers. It is so different than the midfielders that get thrown into the equation with this team usually. Again, not that he has to be a starter, but this guy was, for a while this season, on track to be in the MLS MVP conversation and quite possibly win the award. That's how good he was. He just has something different with the ball at his feet that this team doesn't, outside of Gio Reyna, really offer at this moment in time. The other guy, sort of in terms of looking forward to 2026, is Brendan Aronson's brother Paxton. Paxton was a role player for the Philadelphia Union this season, primarily just because, the other guys in the similar positions he would play are Daniel Gazdag, who is one of the 5 best players in the league, and I mean, just that Union 11 was so good. He just didn't have anywhere to play. But now he has moved to Eintracht Frankfurt to start the European part of his career. This was always something that was going to happen. He's in a good spot in the Bundesliga to continue to develop. And I throw him into this conversation because I will go praise Brendan Aronson all day long. I have never felt like he is a true number 10 in the sense of, taking players on, decisive passes, opening up defenses. That, to me, his best position is on the wing, causing chaos with his pressing and his running. There is absolutely a spot for that guy on this team. There's a spot for that guy in the starting lineup. You need players like Brendan Aronson, and he is as good as any player in the world at what he does. What Paxton offers you that Brendan does not to the level that I want is the technical ability and the creativity. You talk to anybody who has seen these two guys, the all the people who cover the Philadelphia Union closely, you see what they say, and they will all say the same thing, which is the same conclusion I came to. Paxton just has a different level of technical ability. And you see it when he's on the field for the Union. He's not ready yet, but if this move to Germany goes well, there is every possibility. We're talking about two Aaronsons on this team come 2026. They're similar. They play a similar position, but I like Paxton a lot more at the 10. And I like Paxton more as a game changer in the sense of you need somebody to go break a team down because you're trailing by a goal. Brennan is a game changer in the sense of he just makes the other team's life miserable. And I will defend the role he has and how amazing he is at it forever. But Paxton gives you a different level of quality on the ball. And that is something this team, from a number 10 attacking midfielder perspective, really lacks. So those are the two guys, to me, that I would like to see get a real shot to sort of, and again, it's entirely possible that position just doesn't exist in the starting lineup. Because you're going to want to find a way to get Pulisic in there. You're going to want to find a way to get the Brendan Aaronsons, the Gio Reynas in there, and you're not taking out those midfield three. But even if it's just a roll off the bench, I want to see what these two guys can do because to me they are just so different than anybody else in this player pool outside of Gio Reyna. And then finally, the Greg Berhalter conversation. I want to start by saying this is one of those things in sports, like most, where the general public seems to sort of swing from one extreme to the other, and the reality is this kind of stuff is not black and white, it's gray. It's not all good, it's not all bad. Because it seemed like we went from, look at the job Greg Berhalter did in the group stage, to Greg Berhalter should never coach this team again, get him out of here, don't extend his contract, days later because they lost to a Dutch team managed by one of the better coaches at this tournament with all kinds of talent, and in large part lost because of individual mistakes that Greg Berhalter had nothing to do with. Now, did he get outcoached? Sure. But we got to stop making every single game a referendum. I disagreed with I said before the England game, after the England game, and I continue to believe I disagree fundamentally with the way he handled that game. And I think it cost him against the Netherlands. Did it cost him the game? No. But that team looked tired, and Tyler Adams was making uncharacteristic mistakes. I would argue that is in part because he didn't get a rest in this tournament. And you had a game in which you knew the results really didn't matter. You were going to have an opportunity to go through depending on the next game. And none of those players were rested. I just disagree with that. I also disagree with some of the ways that Berhalter handled himself during qualifying, particularly the comments he made after the Canada game. On the flip side to that, look at the body of work he has put together. Forget the optics, how it's looked, whatever it might be. Beat Mexico twice in finals. Has both trophies CONCACAF has to offer. Got to the World Cup. Got out of the group in the World Cup. Was the only CONCACAF team to get out of the group in the World Cup. What else do you want from this guy? It does seem like people are just coming up with reasons not to like him because, whether it's because of the way he got the job, which was admittedly kind of awkward, because he's an MLS guy by and large, or at least, he came from the Columbus Crew, despite the fact that he has European experience too. I don't know what it is, but he just is more polarizing than he needs to be for reasons I don't entirely understand. And the other thing too is, I feel like part of this is people don't think he's good tactically, which hopefully what he did in the group stage puts that to bed. And as an MLS apologist, I just never felt that way about him. I was on board with this from the beginning. My opinion of Greg Berhalter is actually I mean, it increased slightly during this World Cup, but from the point he was hired to the point where the World Cup started, my opinion had actually decreased because of how highly I thought of him coming in. I had no issue with this hire. And the other important thing that Greg Berhalter has done, outside of proving that he is a capable manager, which is not something he should have had to prove, you look at that team, and I talked about this with Morocco. If you want to go check out my recap video of them beating Spain, this is not an easy team to build cohesion with. You've got MLS guys, European guys, guys from families who grew up not in the United States, guys who grew up in all kinds of different situations in the United States. This is not a world in which, right, those guys playing for England, by and large, they're coming from the same handful of academies. They're playing against each other and with each other in the Premier League. You see them coming through the England national team ranks, whatever it might be. You just don't have that luxury with the reality of the U.S. men's national team player pool. And it sure looks like this team enjoys being around each other, wants to go to battle for each other, is completely in sync with what they are doing. I mean, just even watching, I was in some of the press conferences after the roster was named. And it was Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, and Jedi Robinson, I think. And they were just joking around, laughing, smiling, having fun with each other. And also the recruiting battles. Serginho Dest is playing for the U.S. men's national team in large part because Greg Berhalter and Ernie Stewart made a concerted effort to continue to build a relationship with him. The word he kept going back to over and over and over as to why he chose the U.S. was loyalty. And you also, you're winning other important dual national battles, these recruiting battles. All that is a massive check in Greg Berhalter's box. He had the culture, the cohesiveness, the togetherness, and that is something that is really difficult to get on the international stage. And he did it. It's also a testament to these players and the way that they have really embraced each other and embraced this team and embraced their roles representing the United States. But that is part of this too, and Berhalter deserves an immense amount of credit for it. So then the big question, of course, is, okay, what does the U.S. do coaching-wise moving forward? And right before I was recording this, ESPN's Jeff Carlisle is reporting U.S. soccer is in conversations with Berhalter about some kind of contract. It's not exactly clear what kind of contract it is. And the other part of this, too, is Greg Berhalter, it appears, has interest from Europe and is considering it, as he should, and as he should consider that interest he should have. So, whether Berhalter continues short-term, long-term, I just want to go back to my one question when it comes to coaches that doesn't get discussed enough. If you don't want Greg Berhalter, that is justifiable to me. It's also justifiable to say I want Greg Berhalter coaching this team in 2026. If you're going to say what Greg Berhalter has done is not good enough, to me the second part of that is, and here is the person who I think could do better. And I'm looking around, and at this moment in time, I don't see that person. You are not going to convince me Tata Martino, after what just happened to Mexico and how bad Mexico have been since he took over, or Roberto Martinez, after what just happened with Belgium and the lack of cohesion in that squad and their inability to do anything offensively, all that stuff. You're not going to convince me that parting with Greg Berhalter is worth it because one of those two guys is your option. So then you get to the other candidates, and there are two I'm going to mention here quickly. The guy that I've continued to go to bat for, that if I had my choice would be the U.S. men's national team manager in 2026, is Jesse Marsch. I don't really care if Leeds get relegated. I don't really care if he gets fired at some point. Unless things go horribly wrong, I'm going to continue to feel this way. Stylistically, tactically, culturally, I feel like he's a perfect fit for this team. And he knows these players really well because he's coaching a couple of them at the club level every single day right now. I also don't see Jesse Marsch leaving the Premier League as somebody who intentionally got to Europe as quickly as he possibly could to put the European experience on his resume so that he is not exclusively somebody coming from sort of the U.S. soccer structure in MLS, saying, I'm going to forego my team in the Premier League, one of the biggest clubs in England, to go coach the U.S. men's national team in a tournament that starts 4 years from now. Which is where the short-term Berhalter extension becomes really interesting to me. Because you've got to have somebody preparing for these upcoming tournaments. Hopefully it includes Copa America. And that person, because you don't have to go through a qualifying, that person doesn't have to be the same one that actually leads this team in 2026. Because right now, to me, Jesse Marsch is simply not an option. So I don't buy into I don't want to hear you need to get rid of Greg Berhalter now and not offer him an extension because Jesse Marsch is there, because he's not. The other guy is Jim Curtin. I would also, if Jim Curtin said tomorrow, I have decided I would be interested in coaching this team for the next 4 years, I would rather have Jim Curtin than Greg Berhalter. I also do not in any way, shape, or form see that happening. A, because I really think Jim Curtin wants another run at MLS Cup with the way this season ended and the team he has coming back next season. And number two, because I feel Jim Curtin is very similar to Jesse Marsch. And this is a really interesting conversation moving forward about U.S.-born managers. Jim Curtin absolutely is looking at the next step, and I firmly believe it's going to happen in the not-so-distant future. I'm also convinced that next step is Europe. Look at what this guy has done. It's not so simple to just say, well, let's go get that guy who seems to be doing a really good job and, know some of these guys from MLS and all that, and, coached Brendan Aronson. And these managers also have bigger aspirations than the U.S. men's national team. It's just the reality of where the international game sits in the hierarchy of sort of day-to-day soccer. Jim Curtin could go work his way up to the point where he's managing in a Champions League or Premier League, just like Jesse Marsch. He's that good of a coach. So it's the same fundamental issue I have with saying Jesse Marsch. I don't see a world in which Jim Curtin is taking this job. Now, maybe 2 years down the road, he wins MLS Cup with the Union next season. He goes to Europe. It doesn't go well. And we're talking about 2024, and all of a sudden he's out of a job. That is how I could see this changing. So I go back to, this is ultimately where I come down at where I'll end this video. I don't see a better option immediately available than Greg Berhalter. You have got to give Berhalter his due for what he has accomplished. And the fact that he has, I would argue, exceeded expectations for this team since taking over. Maybe you slightly disagree with that, but he certainly hasn't underachieved in any kind of dramatic way. When you take it in totality, maybe the World Cup was slightly disappointing, but he also has 2 trophies. Right? If I told you, no context whatsoever, the U.S. would beat Mexico in 2 finals, have both CONCACAF trophies, get to the World Cup, get to the round of 16, and be the best team from CONCACAF in the World Cup, you're signing up for that, right? So I don't see an option here right now that makes me say Greg Berhalter should be moving on, that the U.S. should not be interested in at least having a conversation about extending Greg Berhalter. In a perfect world, to me, and also for Berhalter, that's a short-term contract to lead through the next tournament or two, because you can go change your mind in 2024, whether it's U.S. Soccer or Greg Berhalter, after hypothetically a Copa America, hopefully, and say, you know what, I don't want to do this. Berhalter may say, I don't want to do this forever, but I'll do it for a couple more tournaments, see if I can increase my stock even a little bit more. There could be, I mean, some kind of option in there, or just have the contract extend through 2020 through a hypothetical Copa America and then make another decision there, whatever it might be. That is the ideal scenario for me, because you can't assume that everything is going to be the same now as it is in 2024. And I do think the US has to do its due diligence on other coaching options. But those options are not available right now. The ones that I would actually say are worth parting with Greg Berhalter for. So this is a tricky situation that I would love to see sort of some nuance applied to this situation. Well, it seems like there might be a Greg Berhalter contract in the near future. Maybe this is just some exploratory talks and Berhalter ends up taking a European job. Who knows? But that is where we are now. Those are my U.S. men's national team thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know this is kind of a long one, so thanks for sticking with me. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.